jewels, they're like baubles. I've never been asked for anything too crazy expensive. Sometimes they want weird things. One demon wanted me to show its sigil all over the place, so I just copied out a bunch of, I think they wanted 12, so 12 reproductions of its sigils and just hid them in books at the library and at the school I was at, so that's what I wanted. I put it on the bulletin board and stuff like that. I just wanted people to see its image. Sometimes they just want weird things, like I had one asked me to, buy a dinner and just like leave it on a park bench. Just told me where I wanted the food and leave the food here. Those are all examples. It's not consistent. I find that similar spirits tend to ask for similar things. Or a spirit that you engage with, I should rephrase that actually, tends to ask for the same type of thing over and over. But yeah, it's a pretty wide variety. It's some kind of minor sacrifice. It's very rare that at least in my own experience, it's very rare that I've ever been asked for anything like outrageous or anything that I couldn't easily accomplish.
What would you do if that happened? Like if it was something you weren't willing to
Oh, I'd just say no deal.
So you find out the cost before then.
Oh yeah, well you should. That's why I'm telling people. That's definitely something you should work out. Yeah, because if you don't work that out, like I said, they will just take what they feel like they deserve. The third method, which is very effective and helpful for probably some of the people who are into the more neo-pagan type of stuff, because they tend to have these relationships already, is if someone has a relationship with some kind of deity, one of the pagan gods, then that kind of relationship can be used to help one out in these situations where a person is in a conflict with another person. Gods is an interesting word. I like to use, when I like to intellectualize away the mystery of the idea of a god, I like to call them self-aware ideas. And I think that that's a fairly accurate representation of what we're talking about here. It's a personality in a sense that is embodied, although not in a physical sense, in some kind of concept or some kind of image. And this means that different of these deities are good for different things. If a person happens to, for whatever reason, have a deep personal relationship with a particular deity, I would always say go to that person first. There's no need to just conjure a random demon if you're like really close to Ishtar and she can kick someone's ass up and down the road for you. Then talk to her, absolutely. But of course, that's her nature is warlike. She's a goddess of war as well as prostitution. So she can be called into bear in certain of these situations where other gods or goddesses or divine images that people may be personally associated may not necessarily be as appropriate. There are a few decent go-tos, and this brings in the question of authority again. Essentially, to understand how to manifest the authority to call a god's energy down to help you or hurt someone else, you have to understand sort of the flavor of that god and how to talk to them and what their personality is like. And then that will define how you appeal to their authority. So, for example, in some cases, I use Loki as the example here as kind of one of the most counterintuitive divine beings that I've personally worked with. I also found that if I tried to justify what I was asking for, he never wanted to do it. He doesn't like reasons for things. He's all about chaos and mischief and stuff like that. So it's actually, if you appear to have no reason at all to want this to happen, he's far more likely to do it because that's more aligned with his nature. So it's helpful, I think, for anyone who does ceremonial magic to create these kind of relationships and sustain these kind of relationships with divine figures. Aleister Crowley, for example, he used Hebrew magic, he used the Greek Kabbalah quite a bit. He relied very heavily on the Bible. The New Testament is crucial to understanding the Book of the Law. These things are inseparable. They're all part of the same trajectory. But at the same time, he had deep personal relationships with the god Pan, for example, and the goddess Aphrodite. These things were crucial to his working, and the Egyptian gods and goddesses obviously are part of the Thelemic system as well, and intertwined with the Christian aspects, which also exist there. So this is going to be another part of using this kind of magic, which is going to help a magician expand their repertoire to all things, and not just conflicts and curses. But
so this is something you brought up last month when we were talking about Enochian magic too, is that you need a relationship with a spirit before you can ask it for something, but you also said that the Enochian angels specifically get irritated if you conjure them for no reason. So
They're
what are
a
examples
little
of things-
different.
What are examples of things you can
What
you
I-
can ask a god for if you don't want anything from them? If you're just trying to build a relationship.
Well, no, I wouldn't even bother. Like gods like to be worshipped.
Yeah. Okay.
You're talking about a self-aware idea that's pure ego.
Okay.
So the more you do to appease their ego, the better. And you can look at their history to find the flavor of it. Like if you're going to use Mars, perfect example. You wanna read some Roman history. You
Okay.
wanna, if you're doing an invocation, you might wanna in the Paean look at some famous Roman victories, talk about famous battles and stuff like that. When you're extolling the virtues of Mars, like talk about some of the awesome shit he did when he was kicking ass in Rome.
So you can just have a chat as long as the chat is about how awesome they are.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
They don't want nuance. They don't want nuance. The Goetic spirits are a little different. Enochian angels are a little different. I've never really. People don't generally use Enochian magic for this kind of thing, so that's kind of a different thing.
This might have been something we discussed on previous script as far as I know, but how do you forge a relationship with a specific entity or deity?
Well, for a deity, like I said, it would be a matter of in a ceremonial setting. Are you familiar at all with like the basics in magic theory and practice in Book 4 or that kind of stuff?
Well, they're doing a lot of reading.
Okay.
A lot of ideas from books, and I don't know which ones are.
Okay, that's fair. Basically, just closing off a ritual space and devoting that time and that energy to the deity in the case of a god would be appropriate until the point at which you feel like you're actually in communication with it. There's a great little book, a subsection of Magic and Theory and Practice called Liber Sarte, which is actually, you can find quite easily online. And that's pretty much a step-by-step guide for how to do this. It's very straightforward, very easy, and Crowley takes a basic sort of bhakti yoga that he learned in.
Is there a framework for working with these type of, like, I like the description of the self-aware ideas, but is it like, how would you just work with, if you come from a monotheistic?
Come from a which, sir?
If you come from a monotheistic perspective,
I would
there's
use.
still a way of working with this kind of energy.
There still is, I think, because God has different names in a monotheistic perspective, and the different names of God, if you look at the different properties of the Hebrew letters as they fall into 777, that would give you some kind of idea of the nature of that name of God and how to interact with God in that
That guide.
through that guise. Yeah,
So it's a
precisely.
similar, yes, working with the one God in all the different
Yes,
forms.
yes, exactly. So that's very doable.
Are saints an obvious choice for that as well as you?
Yeah, actually, in the form of Santeria that's been adopted, or what's commonly known as voodoo, has adopted the use of the saints quite extensively, actually. And then there's no shortage of people who do that or into that, even in the city who do that. There's actually a halfway decent book. I'm not a big fan of this author, or these authors, Chris Hyatt and Jason Black, but they have put out a couple of readable books. And one of them is high praise. I always have high praise for authors. Anyway, one of them is called Urban Voodoo, which is pretty good. It's got some decent ideas in it. I don't like their attitude. I don't like what they bring to the table. I think they're kind of smarmy and douchebaggery. But yeah, it's readable. No, ultimately, I think that everyone has to ask themselves, why they would throw a curse, or why they decided to come to this today, or what is it about this idea that is interesting. But the question of how, I think, reveals a lot